On Zombie Reddit, today's story is...
My mother-in-law forbade me to organize Thanksgiving, claiming that I had no experience. 5 days later, she begged me to save her family reputation, and what happened next nobody saw coming. Thanksgiving has always been my favorite holiday. It's not just about the food or the festive decorations, but about that feeling of family togetherness, the shared laughter, and all the stories that make this day feel truly special. This year I would finally have the opportunity to host. My husband and I had bought our first house, and I had been dreaming about this moment for months. I spent weeks planning menus, searching for recipes online, and even tasting various dishes to make sure everything would turn out perfectly. I wanted to combine traditional dishes such as turkey and stuffing, along with some personal touches such as my renowned pumpkin cheesecake and a mix of roasted vegetables that my husband loved. It was going to be an unforgettable Thanksgiving. At least, that was my initial plan. When I mentioned my intentions to organize the dinner during a family gathering, I expected to receive some enthusiasm or perhaps some useful suggestions. Instead, my mother-in-law's reaction was immediate and scathing. She laughed, not in a kind or funny way, but with a clearly derogatory, almost mocking tone. She told me that she admired my enthusiasm, but that hosting Thanksgiving was not something that one simply decided to do. According to her, it required experience, skill, and a deep knowledge of family traditions that, in her opinion, I simply did not possess. She added that Thanksgiving was a sacred tradition in her family, and that the right to organize it had to be earned. At first, I tried to defend my position. I explained that I had already started making preparations, and that I wanted to create new traditions for my husband and me as we started our own family. But she remained adamant. She insisted that the holiday was too important to risk beginners' mistakes that could ruin the day, and declared that she would be the host. The rest of the family remained uncomfortably silent, except for a few approving nods from her closest allies, such as my sister-in-law. My husband, Matt, tried to mediate the situation by suggesting that perhaps we could share the responsibility of organizing or dividing the tasks. But my mother-in-law quickly rejected that idea, claiming that there could not be two captains in the same boat. I left that conversation feeling completely defeated and humiliated. It wasn't just that she had taken away the opportunity. It was the way she had dismissed me so completely, as if I were incapable of handling something as basic as organizing a family meal. Over the following weeks, my mother-in-law's preparations for Thanksgiving intensified. She began sending detailed emails with seating assignments, dress code instructions, and a strict itinerary for the day. Occasionally, she would throw in passive-aggressive comments about how much work it was to plan such a large event and how she expected everyone to appreciate her efforts. I tried to focus on the positives. At least I wouldn't have the stress of cooking for a large group and could just sit back and enjoy the holiday. But the closer we got to Thanksgiving, the more her hints started to get to me. She would call me to ask Matt's opinion on wine pairings, deliberately excluding me from the conversation. Or she would casually mention how difficult it was to find a turkey that met her high standards, implying that I wouldn't even have known where to start. Matt noticed my frustration and tried to console me, but his attempts often seemed more like an attempt to calm me down than genuine support. He told me not to take it personally, that his mother was simply attached to her ways and didn't mean any harm. He assured me that once she saw how capable I was, she would change her mind. But his words sounded hollow, especially since he wasn't willing to stand up to her and really defend me. As the big day approached, I decided to take a step back. If she wanted to take care of everything, I would let her. I promised myself that I wouldn't lift a finger unless she specifically asked for help. And even then, I would proceed with extreme caution. The day before Thanksgiving, my mother-in-law called to remind me of the dress code, formal cocktail attire, because apparently this was not just a family gathering, but a black tie event. She also reminded me to arrive early to help with the preparations, even though I had made it perfectly clear that I was not part of the planning. I bit my tongue and agreed, not wanting to give her any more reason to criticize me. That night, as I prepared my dress and steeled myself for the next day, I couldn't help feeling a growing resentment bubbling up under the surface. I had so wanted to create something special for my family, to start a new chapter in our lives, and instead I was being treated like a mere guest at my own celebration. On Thanksgiving morning, Matt and I arrived at my mother-in-law's house an hour before the rest of the family. The kitchen was in complete chaos with pots boiling on the stove, dishes piling up in the sink, and my mother-in-law barking orders at anyone who was close enough to hear. She looked me up and down and said she hoped I was ready to help, adding that she had serious doubts about my culinary skills but was willing to give me a chance. Her tone was so condescending that I almost left on the spot. Instead, I forced a smile and asked where she needed me. She handed me a pile of vegetables to peel and chop, and then she was constantly supervising me, criticizing my technique, making disparaging comments about how long I was taking, and by the time the rest of the family arrived, I was on the verge of exploding. As everyone settled down and helped themselves to appetizers, I tried to concentrate on enjoying the day, but my mother-in-law wasn't finished yet. She made sure to announce how much effort she had put into the meal, listing each dish she had prepared and how long it had taken her. She said she hoped everyone appreciated her sacrifices, especially since she had taken it upon herself to ensure that everything was perfect. I looked at Matt hoping he would say something to divert attention, but he was too busy chatting with his father to notice. I felt completely alone, trapped in a situation where I couldn't win no matter what I did. I sat there smiling through gritted teeth and nodding politely at his indirect self-praise. I took comfort in the thought that one day I would prove her wrong, but it didn't take long for everything to fall apart. The atmosphere at my mother-in-law's house was on the verge of collapse, although no one dared to mention it out loud. My mother-in-law clung to her facade of control, but not even her rigid schedule could save her from the inevitable. The first sign of trouble came with the appetizers. My mother-in-law had previously bragged about her famous cheese board, claiming it was the family favorite, but when the guests started to sample it, there were murmurs about some cheeses that seemed to be past their sell-by date. Uncle Rick winced after taking a bite, whispering that the flavor was too intense. My mother-in-law, noticing his reaction, quickly explained that it was supposed to be bold and European. Despite everything, she went ahead with her plans. The dining room had been decorated to perfection with matching tablecloths and personalized place cards, as if she were hosting a dinner for royalty. My mother-in-law smiled as everyone took their seats, clearly expecting admiration for her elaborate preparations. Matt began carving the turkey under my mother-in-law's watchful gaze. The bird was clearly undercooked. In her eagerness to perfect the side dishes, my mother-in-law had neglected to time the turkey in the oven. The center was raw, and there was no way to salvage it. My mother-in-law's face turned bright red as whispers filled the room. Aunt Linda, ever practical, suggested cutting off the outer parts and heating them in the microwave. My mother-in-law seemed horrified at such a suggestion, exclaiming that using the microwave with the turkey was well below her family traditions. Meanwhile, the side dishes were not in a better state either. The sweet potato casserole had been left to stand for too long and was now barely warm with a rubbery marshmallow topping. The green beans were overcooked, having lost their vibrant color for a dull and unappetizing one. The stuffing was still extremely salty despite my mother-in-law's previous attempts to fix it, and the gravy was lumpy. As the family picked uneasily at their plates, the conversation turned tense. Someone mentioned last year's Thanksgiving, hosted by Matt's cousin Claire, and how well everything had turned out. My mother-in-law gave Claire a look so sharp it could cut glass, quickly changing the subject to the wine selection she herself had chosen. The critical moment came when my mother-in-law's centerpiece, an imposing arrangement of candles and flowers, toppled over in the middle of the dinner. It was unclear who had hit the table, but the impact caused wax to spill onto the tablecloth and petals to scatter across the plates. Gasps echoed around the table as my mother-in-law stood up, frantically trying to control the situation. In the midst of the chaos, a glass of red wine was spilled on the immaculate white carpet. She stood motionless, staring at the stain that was spreading as if it were a personal offense. The guests exchanged uncomfortable looks, not knowing whether to help or stay out of it. It was at that moment that my mother-in-law turned her full attention to me. Her eyes burned with accusation as she demanded to know why I hadn't stepped in to help sooner. She claimed that it was my fault that the evening had gone so badly because I had sat by and done nothing instead of acting like a proper daughter-in-law. I was stunned. Her accusation was so out of line, so absurd, that for a moment I didn't know how to respond. Matt tried to intervene by saying that his mother was stressed and didn't mean it, but her words only seemed to fuel her anger. She began to list all the ways I had failed her, from not offering to take care of the turkey to not warning her about the unstable centerpiece. I could feel the heat rising up my face as she continued her tirade, her voice rising with each word. She accused me of sabotaging her, of deliberately sitting back and letting her fail in order to prove some kind of point. I looked around the room, hoping that someone would intervene. But the other guests avoided my gaze, clearly uncomfortable. Aunt Linda cleared her throat and suggested that we all take a break and enjoy dessert in the living room. But my mother-in-law wasn't finished. She turned to Matt, demanding that he make me apologize. Matt looked torn, caught between his mother's fury and my incredulous expression. He muttered something about everyone needing to calm down, but it was too little, too late. My mother-in-law was already storming out of the room, leaving behind an atmosphere charged with tension and silence. After she left, the rest of the family began to silently gather their belongings. Nobody wanted to stay for dessert after the unpleasant episode they had just witnessed. Uncle Rick muttered something about watching the game at home, while Aunt Linda gave me a sympathetic pat on the shoulder before leaving. Matt and I stayed behind to help clean up, although my mother-in-law was nowhere to be seen. As we loaded the dishwasher, Matt finally broke the silence, saying that he didn't understand why his mother had reacted that way. He added that she must have been under a lot of pressure and probably didn't mean what she said. I bit my tongue so as not to argue, but inside I was seething with rage. This wasn't just about stress. My mother-in-law had made it clear from the start that she didn't consider me good enough, and now that her own dinner had fallen apart, she was trying to shift all the blame onto me. When we finally left, the journey home was in complete silence. Matt seemed lost in thought, and I was too angry to talk. I went over the evening in my mind, wondering if I could have done anything differently. But deep down, I knew the answer. No matter what I had done, my mother-in-law would have found some way to criticize me. Update 1. I was still furious the next day when my phone vibrated with a message from my mother-in-law. She wanted me to go to her house to discuss a family matter. I showed the message to Matt, who shrugged and suggested I should go, adding that it might be her way of apologizing. I wasn't so convinced. When I arrived at his house, he greeted me with a strained smile and offered me tea, which I declined. He sat down across from me at the dining room table, hands neatly folded. He began by saying that he had been giving a lot of thought to what had happened and wanted to make things right. For a brief moment, I thought he was actually going to apologize, but then he let out the real reason for the meeting. He said he had decided that the family needed a second Thanksgiving dinner to erase the memory of the first. And of course, he wanted me to be the hostess. I looked at him completely astonished. He argued that it was only fair since I hadn't stepped in to help the first time and insisted that it would be an opportunity to show that I could handle the responsibility. She even offered to send me her recipes and come over early to guide me through the whole process. Her tone was absolutely patronizing, as if she were doing me a big favor, and I had to make a huge effort to keep my composure. I told her I would think about it and left as fast as I could, my mind racing between anger and disbelief. When I got home, I told Matt what had happened. He seemed surprised, but said he thought it might be a good opportunity to smooth things over. I couldn't believe he was siding with his mother again, but I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. That night, as I lay in bed reflecting, I made a decision. If I was going to organize Thanksgiving, it would be entirely on my terms, not hers. And if my mother-in-law thought she could control the situation, she was about to get a rude surprise. Update 2. I decided to accept and organize the Thanksgiving dinner. On the morning of the appointed day, I felt a mixture of nerves and determination. If I was going to do this, it had to be my way. The stress and hype of my mother-in-law's attempt had taken all the joy out of the holiday, and I was determined to get it back, at least for myself. My vision was not focused on perfection. It was about creating a warm, simple atmosphere and making everyone feel at home. I spent the week planning and preparing, but my focus was not on elaborate dishes or over-the-top decorations. Instead, I relied on what I really loved: comfort food, cozy atmospheres, and family in a relaxed environment. The first change I made was to the seating arrangements. I abandoned the idea of a long, formal table in favor of something more intimate. I gathered all the different chairs in the house and borrowed a couple from the neighbors. The table was decorated with simple white plates and linen napkins, accented with small details and a few candles, without a single ostentatious centerpiece in sight. For the menu, I dispensed with the complicated recipes my mother-in-law had insisted I use. Instead, I prepared dishes I knew well, those that gave me joy to cook. A roast turkey, simply seasoned with butter and herbs, along with a honey-glazed ham as an alternative. The sides were classic but simple: creamy mashed potatoes, green beans with garlic and almonds, and homemade stuffing that didn't include a single pre-made mix. For dessert, I baked an apple crumble and pumpkin pie the day before, avoiding the last-minute rushes I had seen my mother-in-law suffer. Matt helped where he could, going to the shop for last-minute ingredients and keeping me company in the kitchen. I noticed that he seemed more relaxed this time, perhaps because I wasn't constantly giving orders or stressing about every little detail. When the first guests arrived, I could immediately feel a change in the atmosphere. Instead of being greeted with rigid instructions and a strict schedule, they entered a home filled with the aroma of roasting turkey and soft background music. I greeted each person warmly, encouraging them to help themselves to a drink from a small bar trolley I had set up in the living room. Aunt Linda arrived first, bringing her famous spinach dip. She looked around and smiled, commenting that the house already felt more welcoming than last week's disaster. Uncle Rick was soon following her, balancing a bottle of wine in each hand. He joked about needing both after what he called the Thanksgiving apocalypse. As more relatives arrived, the room filled with laughter and conversation. People mingled freely, drinking cider and nibbling on the snacks I had laid out: a simple cheese board, vegetable sticks, and a bowl of my favorite spiced nuts. It was nothing pretentious, but it didn't need to be. My mother-in-law arrived with Matt's father about 30 minutes later. From the moment she entered, I could tell she was nervous. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the informal setup and the relaxed atmosphere. She didn't say much, just handed me a covered plate, muttering that it was her contribution. I thanked her and placed the plate on the buffet table, resisting the urge to look at its contents. From her expression, I could see that she was already comparing my efforts with hers, looking for any detail to criticize. When it came time to eat, I called everyone to the table without much ceremony. My mother-in-law hovered near the kitchen, offering advice that no one had asked for on how to carve the turkey and present the dishes. I nodded politely, but ignored most of her suggestions, concentrating on making sure everyone had what they needed. The meal turned out to be everything I had hoped for. People passed around the dishes, filling their plates and praising the flavors. Aunt Linda declared the mashed potatoes the best she had ever tasted. Even Uncle Rick, known for being picky about food, commented that the turkey was cooked to perfection. The conversation flowed naturally, with stories and jokes filling the room. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was part of the family, instead of a stranger observing from the outside. Even Matt seemed more comfortable, laughing with his cousins and stealing bites of cake when he thought no one was looking. My mother-in-law, however, was another story. She remained rigid in her seat at the end of the table, pecking at her food and occasionally interjecting comments about how she would have done things differently. She mentioned her failed centerpiece, calling it a lesson in overambition, but it was clear that she was not over it yet. At one point, she commented that my green beans were a little too rustic and suggested I use her recipe next time. Aunt Linda chimed in that she loved the simplicity and found it refreshing not to have everything drowned in cream and cheese. My mother-in-law's smile was strained as she took another bite, clearly holding back from responding. After dinner, I did not insist on a strict cleaning schedule or assign specific tasks. Instead, I encouraged everyone to help themselves to dessert and return to the living room. Some people stayed at the table chatting, while others gathered around the fireplace to share old anecdotes with a drink in hand. Matt's younger cousin Emily came over at one point and told me she hoped I would organize the dinner again next year. She said the whole evening felt more like what Thanksgiving should be about family and connection, not stress and appearances. By the end of the night, even the most skeptical seemed convinced. Aunt Linda gave me a big hug before leaving, saying that she hadn't enjoyed Thanksgiving so much in years. Uncle Rick promised to bring even better wine next time, adding that my cooking deserved it. My mother-in-law was one of the last to leave. She stood near the door, her expression unreadable as she thanked me for hosting. She said it was nice to see the family together, and then added that she hoped I hadn't been too overwhelmed. I could see that she wanted me to admit that it had been difficult, to give some validation to her previous claims that I wouldn't be able to handle it. Instead, I simply smiled and said it had been a pleasure, watching her jaw tighten slightly. When the door closed behind her, I let out a deep sigh. Matt came up behind me, put his arms around my waist, and kissed the top of my head. He said he was proud of me and admitted that he hadn't realized how much of a difference the right atmosphere could make. As we finished cleaning up, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of accomplishment. I had achieved what I set out to do, create a Thanksgiving celebration that wasn't about impressing or meeting someone else's expectations. It was about family, connection, and showing everyone, including myself, that I was perfectly capable in my own way. Update 3. The morning after the dinner, I woke up with a feeling of calm and clarity that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hosting the dinner had been a success, and not just because the food was excellent or the guests had a good time. For the first time, I felt that I had proved something important to myself, that I could create a warm and welcoming space without giving in to anyone's impossible expectations. But as I had anticipated, the matter was not over. My mother-in-law has never been one to let things lie. Mid-morning, my phone vibrated with a message from her. She had written a long text, but the first line already clearly indicated where she was going. She felt the need to express how I had undermined her role as matriarch of the family, and that my role as hostess had been an attempt to take control. I looked at the screen for a moment before handing the phone to Matt. He quickly checked the message, his face twisting in disgust. He said that it was just his mother's usual way of deflecting attention, and that I shouldn't let it get to me. I replied that I wasn't upset. I had simply ended the situation. My mother-in-law's accusations no longer carried any weight for me. What had started as insecurity, fueled by her constant belittlement, had transformed into determination. I told Matt that I was no longer going to interact with her unless absolutely necessary. If she wanted to cling to her narrative, that was her choice. Matt nodded, although he seemed uneasy. He offered to talk to her, but I stopped him. I reminded him that although I appreciated his support, his mother was his responsibility, not mine. As the day went on, the messages kept coming, each one more dramatic than the last. She claimed that I had disrespected her legacy, ruined family traditions, and created a division between her and her son. At one point, she even accused me of turning Matt against her, a comment that made me laugh out loud. That evening, she changed tactics. Instead of sending me messages directly, she started calling Matt. I could hear snatches of their conversation from the other room. Her voice rose and fell as Matt responded in calm but firm tones. When she hung up, he looked exhausted. She informed me that she wanted to clear the air by inviting us to have coffee the following day. I told him she wasn't interested. He asked if I was sure, suggesting that maybe it would help improve the situation. I replied that although I understood his perspective, I was not willing to endure another session of veiled insults and backhanded compliments. I made it clear that he was welcome to go if he wished, but I preferred to stay out of it. Matt went without me, and when he returned, he seemed even more exhausted than before. He told me that my mother-in-law had spent most of the time repeating the same arguments, insisting that I had overstepped the mark and made her look bad. She wanted an apology, not only from me, but also from Matt for allowing it to happen. Matt replied that there was nothing to apologize for and that the family had genuinely enjoyed the dinner. He reminded her that the first Thanksgiving had been her idea and that I had only intervened when she herself had asked me to. She did not take these arguments well. Over the next few days, my mother-in-law's behavior became increasingly erratic. One day, she would send long messages full of emotion. The next, she would send one-word replies. She tried to recruit other members of the family to take sides, distorting the story to present herself as a victim. But to my surprise, most did not believe her version. Aunt Linda, who had been one of her strongest supporters in the past, called me to say that she thought I had handled the situation with great dignity. She said she appreciated the effort I had put into the dinner and thought it was time for my mother-in-law to turn the page. Even Uncle Rick, who normally avoided family dramas like the plague, got in touch to say I had done an excellent job and that he was looking forward to my next Thanksgiving dinner. The support of the family meant a lot to me, but it was Matt's reaction that really made the difference. A change was beginning to take place in him. He started to stand up for me more firmly, resisting his mother's attempts to control and manipulate the situation. One night, After another particularly tense phone call with my mother-in-law, he sat down next to me on the sofa and sighed deeply. He confessed that he was tired of always being in the middle, trying to please everyone. He admitted that he had spent years ignoring his mother's behavior because it was easier than confronting her directly. I told him that I understood his situation, but I also reminded him that it wasn't my responsibility to solve his mother's problems. I explained that although I was willing to support him, I wasn't going to put myself in situations where I felt disrespected or belittled. Matt completely agreed with my position. Thanksgiving became a turning point, not only in my relationship with my mother-in-law, but also in how I perceive myself. I realized that I didn't need her approval or validation to feel secure in my role within the family. I also learned the importance of setting clear boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable or creates conflict, especially considering it had only been a year since our wedding. Update 4. I received an unexpected call from Uncle Rick. When I saw his name on my phone screen, I braced myself for one of his usual quips. He greeted me with his characteristic energy, asking if he could have a quick word. I smiled, thinking that this call would probably be a welcome break from the tense family atmosphere of the last few days. When I told him to go ahead, he immediately moved on to what seemed like a rather serious request. Rick explained that he needed me to do him a favor, something really important. I raised an intrigued eyebrow and asked him to continue. His voice dropped to a whisper of feigned seriousness, as if he were sharing some confidential secret. What he wanted was for me to organize a small family gathering, but with a special condition. He wanted it to be a secret gathering. Without my mother-in-law invited, I was momentarily taken aback, blinking in surprise at such a request. A secret gathering sounded like the perfect escape from the family drama I had been experiencing. He confirmed his request, adding that it would be a post-New Year celebration, and by the way, his birthday was just after New Year's. So this gathering would also serve as his birthday party. I felt a spark of enthusiasm at the idea. A birthday dinner focused solely on having fun without the pressure of having to impress anyone. It sounded absolutely perfect. I asked him if he was really asking me to organize his birthday dinner but keep it a secret. Rick laughed out loud, assuring me that it would be much more than just a birthday celebration. It would be mainly about having a good time and relaxing in company. Rick's tone changed as he explained the details to me. He wanted a small, informal gathering where everyone could bring their favorite dishes. No elaborate seating arrangements, no stress about food preparation. Just food that everyone would enjoy sharing together. He promised to take personal charge of the drinks and suggested that the others could contribute various side dishes. I could bring my famous dessert while he would take care of the main course. The whole idea was about enjoying each other's company, not following a rigid plan or stressing about achieving perfection. I laughed, feeling the pressure lift just thinking about it. I assured Rick that I would bring my cakes and even promised to prepare some fun games for after dinner. Rick seemed absolutely delighted when I agreed, commenting that this was exactly the kind of celebration he had been longing for. Something fun and relaxed, and with no one breathing down their necks with demands about traditions or impossible standards. The more we talked about it, the better the idea sounded. He would make sure that the real family members were informed and that everything was kept completely secret. I assured him that I was fully committed and that I was looking forward to the moment with enthusiasm. I was genuinely excited about this plan. When I finally hung up the phone, I had a big smile on my face. I couldn't wait for the day to come. I was really excited about this new opportunity.